And we're live. Welcome back to another episode of Professor and the Idiot. I'm Nick Wolfinger.
I'm Dalton Whitehead.
And for the first time in our show, we have a guest. Our guest is a jiu-jitsu training partner of mine who is a police officer for the UC Berkeley Force and has worked in that capacity for 20 years. So we thought it would be interesting to bring him in and ask him about his job and about policing, and of course to talk about jiu-jitsu. So with that, I'd like to introduce Sean Aranis.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. We have a bunch of questions. Do you want to start, Dalton?
Yeah, sure. I've always, since I started training jiu-jitsu 3 years ago, I've been a huge advocate for police officers, first responder types, of learning how to grapple. Because I see so many videos, and I understand that you need to be cautious when you're dealing with criminals, but so many videos of cops I see it with their guns drawn and tasers drawn. I'm like, man, just grab a hold of that motherfucker. Just take him down. So to hear that you're a cop with training, I'm curious, did you start training before or after you became a cop? Was that the reason you started training? And how many other cops have started training?
Right. I started doing grappling before I became an officer, and it's definitely helped me. And I would say that not many police officers do the training that I work with. They just rely on, I guess you could say, their command presence to work most of the time.
I have to add that Sean is famous locally. Anytime I run into a cop and I'm chatting with him, I say, "Hey, do you know my buddy Sean who does jiu-jitsu?" And oh yeah, Sean, the grappling cop. And that I've had that experience with, various officers from various different police forces. So you have a reputation, Sean.
Thanks. I guess any publicity is good publicity. There did come a time to where I started to have to wear a baseball cap around, so I didn't get unwanted recognition too much. Yeah.
Has that happened more than once?
Oh yeah, it happened. The closer I get to campus, the more likely it is to occur. So it happens constant. So around campus, walking to and from my car or BART, it'll occur. Yeah. So. Yeah.
But that's your beat, right? Do you want to talk about what your beat is and what you do on the job?
Well, let's see. Yeah, I'm the senior patrol officer, so I've been able to sort of get a job assignment that I really enjoy, which is primarily I straddle two different shifts and kind of help out on either one, but at the same time I'm not really as responsible as anybody else in either one. Sort of just welcomed help. So we have a number of different calls that types of calls that we respond to that are pretty similar to any other police agency, and during the interim I'm able to sort of do community-oriented policing in the business district right next to campus. So
on a bike?
On a bicycle. Yeah. Yes. I've been a bicycle cop, full-time bike cop for 19 years.
So pretty much the whole time you've been with the UC Force.
Almost the entire time, yeah. So it's been pretty rewarding. I feel very fortunate to, because I was an avid cyclist before, so I feel pretty fortunate to have landed in this position. Yeah, very lucky.
That's the kind of policing that people always say we need more of. Police officers who know their beats, who know the people on the beats, who talk to them. Everyone we constantly hear about how that's an effective form of policing. And I've seen you do that kind of work, Sean, all the time and heard stories about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Uh,
good
yeah.
stories.
What's that?
Good
Good
stories.
story. Yeah. Yeah, I'm well known on the first 5 or 6 blocks of Telegraph Avenue, um, and I have do a lot of networking there with business district employees and security guards, and a lot of places that sell alcohol call me a lot of times when they're having problems or drunks in there tearing it up. I give my cell phone out, my cell phone number. That's like an invaluable tool for me to stay busy and to be able to respond, very efficiently. I don't have to wonder where crime is. People just call me when they see the crime, and then I can go there.
I give your cell phone number out too, Sean.
Yeah, can I get that number just in case?
Yeah. For everybody listening, the number is.
So how? Go ahead, Nick.
Oh
Sorry.
no, you go. You go.
How prevalent is crime in the area you work, and how has it changed in the 19 years that you've been there?
Interesting. Well, I could take a shot at the second question, which is, how has it changed? But regarding the first, it's very prevalent. I think there was a statistic out there that a critical statistic of about the U.S. saying that, there's 700 people per 100,000 population that are in jail. So 700 people for 100,000 people are incarcerated, and whereas in Switzerland it's like 125. Well, I did my own check, and I came to believe that Alameda County is about 130 or less, but it doesn't look like Switzerland out there. Last time I checked. So yeah, the problem is there's a lot of crime, and the repeat offenders just get out immediately, whether they're convicted, quotes convicted, or not. They're out on the street pretty much the next day, or sometimes the same day, and so there's very little for those that have nothing to lose. There's very little incentive for them to change their lifestyle, change their kind of criminal ways. So crime is very prevalent. Yeah.
So just to establish some context, grew up in Berkeley, California, went to college here, live nearby now. The area right immediately south of campus is, how would you describe it just to someone who's listening and who's hearing this from England, say?
Well, it's kind of a mix of hippie with college, with sort of seedy.
Yeah.
I guess is one way to do it. There's a unique aspect to it, and there's also a lot of homeless, transient types of people, and all the variations in there. Yeah.
I think that's accurate. I can say, as someone who spent a lot of time in this area, that at alternate parts of my life, I've gone to Telegraph to buy records and play video games. I've gone there to score hard drugs in my youth. I'm not joking. I've gone there later as a college professor to meet with collaborators to work on a book, and now I'm there a lot because my jiu-jitsu gym is there. So it's,
that's right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So it certainly is an area that, I guess to put it blandly, serves many constituencies.
Including your jiu-jitsu gym, yes.
Yeah.
Stephen and Riley call me and his wife to move along people who they're having problems with, or people who burst into the jiu-jitsu gym screaming or threatening people.
It's a common occurrence. It's now practiced to a lot of the time to lock the door once we're all in training.
Oh yeah, that's wise.
Yeah. just because there are a lot of transients and mentally ill people who will just come in and start ranting and raving.
Right. Right.
Now, when you say they're more sophisticated, Sean, are you talking about more like technology-based crimes,
Um,
or they're just smarter in what they're
I
doing?
guess. Well, a couple of things I could think of. One is uh, when drugs were kind of more prevalent, they started going to credit card crimes or theft or fraud because those were just straight up property and didn't carry the same type of enhancements. Um, People who commit robberies, muggings, in the past a lot of times they'd be just packs of kids or groups and they would be on foot. And now quite most of the time I would have to say they're on cars. So they're, in some ways, they're a lot harder to get, and you don't know if they're still out there. Whereas 20 years ago, you had a pretty good feeling they were still out there on foot somewhere. You know. Another interesting thing is there's a higher use of firearms and kind of replica type firearms, such as airsoft guns that look exactly like firearms. So there's more firearm or firearm type robberies. So I guess that's kind of what I was saying.
That's scary.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, there was always kind of a extra oomph back then when you heard that there was a gun involved, but now it's pretty much routine.
Hmm. That's interesting, and it seems to be local given the national data overall show a big decline in violent crimes over the last 20 years, but apparently not in this area. Huh.
Yeah, there's definitely more firearms, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah. But yeah.
Now, being a cop that's on a bike and is out on the streets, you probably have a better connection with the people that live in the area. Do you find that because of that you have an easier time dealing with witnesses or talking to people about looking for suspects? Like, do you feel like maybe people have more trust with you because they see you more often and you're more close,
accessible,
you're more accessible in the community than just driving by in a car?
That's what I meant by community policing, but go on, Sean.
Well, there's two aspects of that question. Well, that is people who see me, who know me, and then there's people who just happen to see me who maybe have never seen me again. And in both situations, I mean, yeah, definitely easier for me to zip around, be seen, flip a U-turn on a one-way street and just go back. And then people are more likely to share their problems with me. Law enforcement related problems when they see me going down the street, which I really take great pleasure in helping them with because, there's a lot of police officers out there who think that problems are silly, such as, somebody keeps coming in and stealing a candy bar, or someone keeps calling me and annoying me, or all these long range of list of types of crimes that people are bothered by. And a lot of cops are just like, why waste my time? But for me, I mean, the great pleasure in doing more community-oriented policing is knowing that I have an easy fix for somebody who's kind of at their wit's end. And so that's right. I really enjoy that. Seems like a very efficient way for society to handle problems.
Is helping people one of the things that motivated you to become a police officer in the first place, or is that a fair question? Is that a...
Well, you do your job, you join your job for whatever reasons you may have in the beginning, but then, I mean, I'm sure this happens for everybody. The successful people are probably, as time goes by, you get a reality check and you find more sophisticated or realistic reasons for being motivated. Initially, as a kid, my mom, and it was my single parents. It was my mom and me and my little sister, and we were had a little bit of a roaming lifestyle. And my mom's kind of a hippie, and you'd be we'd just be kind of like out, and you'd be hanging out a lot of times with people you didn't know. You'd be at like a beach or something, and your little 6-year-old spidey senses would be going off. You're feeling a little bit nervous about some suspicious-looking characters, or a motorcycle gang down the beach a little ways. And so in my naive mind, I used to just think, geez, I really wish a cop would pull up, One cop could settle, could totally solve the problem. In my mind, it was one cop could beat anybody, could, basically take on any problem. And so that kind of is a little bit of a theme, because we always continued to live sort of a wandering or isolated lifestyle. And so that's kind of what guided me into becoming a police officer. As time went on, so when I joined as an adult, I'd had a 4 degree, and I had been in the Army, the Army Infantry, and was raring to go. Joined this campus police department, and pretty quickly found out that people were just trying to take it easy, don't rock the boat, and they didn't really want to teach me the super cool police techniques that I thought they were going to do. So or give me much encouragement. So I kind of turned to other ways to to motivate myself.
I can certainly say that being in graduate school didn't prepare me to be a professor. I had to learn on the job.
Yeah.
I've heard that from people who've gotten graduate degrees in social work, clinical psychology, many other fields. Is there a continuing education requirement for police officers as there is for doctors, lawyers, psychologists, and many other fields? Do you have to go to classes every year?
There's a continuing, what do you call it? There's perishable skills, but there's also, the concerns of the day, such as whether it's being more cognizant of the needs of quote unquote sexual assault survivors, or racial discrimination, or stuff like that. Then they constantly will immerse you in the latest sort of public concern, is how I feel. So I guess education, but it's a kind of education in some ways that's it's mainly just, I feel like it's people killing time sometimes to just be able to say, oh, we gave them 8 hours or 40 hours of this training, as if the amount of hours meant something. Yeah.
I can certainly see that if the department, or indeed any organization, is responding, say, to an episode of just out there racism. Okay, let's say there's a racist police officer and he does something that's really, really terrible. Then your commanders can say, yeah, we solved the problem because we gave all our officers 100 hours of training and implicit bias.
Right.
Yeah, and that training may or may not. It sounds like often may not actually ameliorate any problem.
Yeah, we had a couple years ago, about 2 years ago, that one of the latest rages was the CIT training, and that was how to kind of interdict or understand mentally ill people when they're kind of in a crisis mode, or people that are super high,
right,
how to bring them down rather than rushing in and exacerbating it and have to use deadly force, to kind of more stand off. And there just wasn't 40 hours worth of material, and if there had been, could I have it all crammed into my brain, in 1 week? It's like, could you learn? I don't know how many hours 3 hours a week is a 3-unit class, and that equates to for 40 hours,
right.
That's 13 weeks, right? Yeah. So could you learn 13 weeks of class in 40 weeks just because you crammed it all into 1 week. No, you couldn't, and that's kind of a problem. It could have been covered in like 4 hours with some refreshers.
Was some of the training worthwhile, and how to de-escalate people who were in crisis?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say 2 to 4 hours of that would have been good, and it would be good, ongoing training. It was good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of it. Now, let me kind of clarify that. I've at that time I've been a police officer for 18 years. So, if you'd only been a police officer for 2 years, then I have to admit that'd be a lot more there for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Do they ever ask you to teach this kind of people? You've been there a long time. You have a lot of experience.
You make me laugh, Nick.
Or is it like me, where my colleagues don't give a shit what I think?
I just, well, I have certain expertises, and it just seems like, it's like there's plenty of expertise to go around, right? And so I have my little area of expertise, and it just seems like wise if they would kind of come around when they're to me or whoever the most expert guy is in whichever area they're coming around to, and just sort of check in and say, hey, this is what we got. What do you think? But there doesn't seem, with my agency, no offense, my agency administration, but there doesn't seem to be much of that.
That's too bad.
Yeah, I think it's everybody's rushing around, time constraints, and they just they get stuck at their desk. They sort of get a tunnel vision. Yeah, but yeah.
Dalton, you have a question?
Have you ever had to use your jiu-jitsu in during work?
Oh, yes, so many times. So many times. It's just you generally want to use things in a manner that's also consistent with your defensive tactics training. So that's what I tend to do. You're not going to, if someone goes to turtle position, right, you're not going to jump into a rear naked choke on them, right? More, 49 times out of 50, you're not going to do that. But yeah, it's just like I'm just not worried at all about grappling out there. I could think of maybe three to five times that I was a little surprised or kind of worried, but I mean, I've been in hundreds of physical confrontations, and it just gives you an advantage. Yeah. So.
Do you try and tell other officers, and maybe especially new officers, to you should really get into this? It'll help you remain calm in certain situations, and I mean, it could save your life or somebody else's life. Do you really try and promote that to other officers?
I do, and there's been one instance where someone asked me to train them on the side, and so I did for about three or four times, but it just fades away. I mean, we do it because we like it. I mean, right. Nick doesn't even need it in his job, right? But he still does it. You don't need it in your job, do you, Nick?
Not yet. But you never know. Some student will start talking shit and complain about their grade,
right?
And come at me
and throw their leg up at you.
Right. Oh yeah, that's a running joke at the gym, right? If I ever got into a street fight, the first thing I would do was invert and hit an Imanari roll.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, I guess everybody's the victim of the same thing I'm a victim of, which is you kind of do what you want. So what I happen to, I guess the thing about me is I didn't sort of just land this cool government job. I actually wanted to be a police officer my entire life, since about the age of 5 or 6, and then as it so happens, I like to do sort of like mano-a-mano type physical contact, whether it's football or, in the paint, on basketball. You still get that jostling around, body weight type thing, and it's really challenging and fun because you get better, and when you're better, then you're kind of in charge in a certain way. It's fun to like be in charge. Whether it's jiu-jitsu or you're rushing the quarterback or you're down low clearing the paint so you can get the rebound or setting a pick. It's just fun to be doing good. So I'm lucky enough to have chosen that job. And in fact, one of the reasons I chose UC Berkeley was because in my mind, and I was correct, it seemed like such a perfect place for bicycles. So, and I had an extensive biking past, so it worked out really well.
How many times have you had to chase someone down on your bike?
Yeah, probably about 30 times. It's been a little while, but yeah, it's probably more than 30. Yeah, it's been a lot of times. I've had to like sideswipe people or actually, grab them with one hand if they're on a bike and brake or jump off my bike and kind of bull ride them to the ground or just tackle them or just ride behind them while they're super tired and I'm just cruising and trying to sound as calm as I can, saying, okay, stop,
I suspect many people would get out of breath and tired before you would.
Right, yeah.
Have you guys heard about endurance hunting?
Like the ancient technique of chasing down an animal over miles and miles until it becomes too exhausted.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's still practiced in, elsewhere in the developing world where the animal could be much faster than you, but people have stamina that animals don't.
Interesting.
So now that we've started talking about jiu-jitsu, having rolled with Sean a number of times, his MO is to pull half guard, and then he has really good half guard sweep game, and then good top control. But I wonder if that probably doesn't come into play too much. That particular jiu-jitsu game doesn't come into play too much when you're on the job.
No, it doesn't. The one funny time where I ended up below, it was it's usually me and about 30 meth heads or what used to be crackheads, and I'm just hanging out. And so one time I was in the People's Park, which is just all homeless drug abusers, and so I was there and I got into it with some guy, and he was just he's a 140-pound crackhead, and I went to do a hip throw on him, and he hip threw, he stepped around, and he was lower to the ground and frisky, and he threw me.
Wow.
And I just, yeah. But I just remember hitting the ground, and obviously I immediately reversed him, half out of being very skilled, obviously, and skilled compared to him, and then second of all being extremely embarrassed. You think you're going to throw somebody and they just throw you. It was pretty embarrassing. So I heard about that for a while. Just
from the people on your beat or your fellow officers?
From all the rest of the crackheads, they would laugh at me for a while.
Was that friendly? Did you laugh back, or were you?
Oh yeah, you have to. Well, it's interesting. When I started being a police officer, as I had said earlier, the senior officers they were done. They were burnt out from all the lack of leadership, or they weren't burnt out from lack of leadership. There was a lack of leadership, and they were burnt out from I feel like all the craziness on Telegraph the previous 15 years, and all the crazy apartheid or whatever protests they've had to deal with. They'd be just like really long protests. So a lot of times I was just alone out there, and as the time went by, I learned if I was alone talking to a couple drug addicts and some drug dealers or whoever, if I put on a performance and say stuff that's they're not expecting, that's funny, or if they insult me, agree with it, or turn around, then I could develop this rapport thing. And when you have rapport with somebody, I found it's almost impossible for them to surprise you, because first of all, they don't really have a big reason to want to hurt me,
Right.
and second of all, it just kind of gave you a link into their mind or to their what their intent was, and so I could put on a performance, and which sometimes included laughing at myself.
Right.
And so, that's if they're making fun of me in some ways, it's giving me an avenue into having rapport for that particular contact and being safer.
Huh. And I would think that would allow you to do more effective policing, to know when there's trouble, to know how to restore order if there's an unruly person or a group of people.
Right. And yeah, 3 out of 4 times, a lot of times I can isolate it, meaning if there's an unruly person, people will come and they'll be like, I've ridden by people, groups, and they're like, oh, something's going to get done now, right? Because I kind of go in and try to address it, and not feeling like they have to jump in defense of the person who's causing a problem, or even being glad that I showed up. So, I try to definitely if somebody says something that has some truth, if you validate it, again, you're creating rapport with them. And sometimes you can validate in a way that doesn't demean yourself as well, because you put your own spin on it.
Right.
But they're still listening to you, so you can definitely have fun out there.
That's good.
Yeah,
I understand that.
Yeah. So, and when I'm out there with sometimes I will talk about them and call them my bums, and it's just when I go out there, it's like, let's say there's like 5 things that I'm going to be focusing on, so they know if they're doing anything aside from those 5 things, even if it's illegal or something that other officers might comment on or do, I'm not gonna hit on it. I'm not gonna have a problem with it, and so they can relax around me, and I think that's important for them. Normal citizens can relax around you when they're not doing anything wrong, kind of.
I relax around you, Sean.
And you relax around me. Unless
you're a model citizen, Nick. You have nothing to worry about.
Sean has to watch out because I'll sick my pig on him.
Yeah.
Sean and Samson don't get along.
Hey, that pig kind of scared me, so I feel you.
Well, he's all snort, no bite.
Yeah.
When you say, there are a few things that people can do, what kind of things are you talking about in particular?
A few things people can do as far as, the 5 things that they cannot do or can do?
Either one, or both. What are both? Okay,
well, when I arrive at a lot of times there's my hot spots that I keep an eye on, in areas where there's like a higher concentration, that there's kind of groups of people gathering, and I go in there to check them out to get a sense of, make sure there's no outlier there who's kind of violent. Right. To make sure people realize that, hey, you may be here, but you don't own it. So other people can walk through. Don't think like you own it, and and we also have like a hoarding issue, where people find stuff and drag it into our property or onto the sidewalk, and so that's one of the things I can discourage. Now, if people I'm not trying to get the drinking ticket or the smoking ticket or the drug ticket. So basically, they'll see me coming. I'm not trying to surprise them.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So they get away with stuff like that. I'm not going to do a probation search on somebody without a significant cause.
Okay.
I'm not going to serve a small warrant on them. So they know I'm not digging for anything.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just face value type things.
I totally understand that, and that makes a lot of sense.
Right. Right.
And there's an article I read in graduate school that was written in about 1967 about policing that was really interesting, and it talked about how obviously officers can't enforce every law, so they just enforce selectively in order to maintain local order. And
That's
that,
exactly what I do. I mean, only enforce those things you can do consistently and effectively.
right. It was a really good article from, I think, 1967. And so, yeah, it certainly seems to match what you're saying about how you police.
Right. Right. And I'm only one guy, right? So it's like I got to pick and choose my battles.
Right.
So.
Go for it, Dalton.
How do you feel about drug laws and the changing drug laws, and how does that affect? How would that affect your policing if there's a growing movement of decriminalizing or even legalizing most or all drugs?
Right.
How do you feel about that as someone who is on the streets and also has to deal with these laws every day?
Well, there's two parts to it. There's what I feel, and then how much of what I feel is allowed to bleed into, my street strategies. I mean, I know that there's good people that do drugs, and drugs have a long-term cost. A lot of things have a long-term cost, not just drugs. There's one reason to deal with drugs is if they are illegal, then there's an expectation, then people have the right and people have standing to object. So if marijuana was still illegal to possess, then if you're walking down a campus or a public, thoroughfare and it smells like marijuana all over the place, then somebody might think, who is otherwise lawful, might think, hey, the cops don't come around here, I feel less safe, or I feel like the cops should do something about that, So if we should make a general effort, or at least a minimal effort, to enforce the laws, I feel, whether or not we agree with it. Like, I think that marijuana should be legal in a lot of respects. I agree with that. So since things have become more legal, I feel like it's been a lot easier for me to ignore those things, because sometimes the law and order, the face value of law and order isn't super hung up on enforcing those laws, right? Like, if you're smoking some weed, it's like, who cares?
Yeah.
Right? So, and now I can ignore it. It's easier to ignore.
That sounds positive to me.
Yeah.
So I know that police officers are, despite marijuana being legal, are still tested and so aren't allowed to smoke. But if you weren't tested, would you smoke pot, Sean?
I'm not tested, and I don't
Oh,
smoke.
Okay. I was a friend who's with the Contra Costa sheriff says they're not allowed to smoke.
Yeah, it's kind of something that never comes up. I feel like all the police officers in my department, or that I work, don't feel the need
Right.
to use it, or to use it in any way.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting and plus, if you do need to use it for the health benefits, I understand according to Joe Rogan, there's all sorts of ways to use it that the psycho part of it has been removed.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I have CBD with the psychoactive part removed.
Yeah. Oh, do you?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I would think jujitsu. I mean, that's jujitsu, marijuana are almost synonymous. That makes you and me two of the 5 people in America who do jujitsu who don't smoke pot. Dalton, how many times have you rolled where you haven't been high?
Most, actually. I actually am not a big fan of rolling when I'm high. I've done it a few times, but I don't know. I've heard Joe talk about how he thinks it makes you better, and Just me personally, I work construction. I get drug tested, so I rarely smoke these days. So, but there was times in my life where I smoked very heavily, and obviously I'm a fan of it. But when it comes to grappling, I don't really feel it that much when you're in the heat of the moment, but I also don't enjoy it that much. Me personally, I would rather like drink a beer or two when I'm training. That's more fun to me. Nothing more than that, because then you get bloated and then your stomach hurts. But I like rolling sober. That's just my personal preference.
At Salt Lake Grappling Club, where Dalton trains and I train when I'm in Utah, there's a fridge that has beer in it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let's be honest, Nick. I'm the only one that's drinking that.
There's a fridge, and Dalton has some beers in there.
Yeah, that's right. That is 100% correct. But even then, that's not an every training session thing by any means. So I like training sober.
There are always, if you do jiu-jitsu, you have that training partner who always comes in reeking of dope. It's just a thing. There's a guy like that at Bay Jiu-Jitsu in Berkeley, and he's much better than me. And he's always, he smells like,
Don't knock it. Yeah.
Yeah, he smells like Jeff Spicoli's jacket or van.
Well, yeah, my jiu-jitsu style is kind of that mano-a-mano type drive, but I feel like that sometimes, blinds me to other things, and sometimes I wish I could, be more observant at times. So, I feel like it could be beneficial, sometimes to be a little high or a little like, wow, really? And then it happens. You watch stuff happen.
I think that's good, personally, that you're not tested in your job. I think just having routine drug testing is a huge waste of money, a huge infringement on personal liberty, and America's the only country in the world that does that.
Oh, really?
I'm so glad you said that, Nick.
Yeah, I agree. People who do construction in Germany aren't tested. Maybe I'm sure pilots are, but aside from that, it's just an infringement on our rights.
Interesting, yeah.
Well, that, and especially when there's no testing for alcohol at all. So, I mean, you could be a full-blown alcoholic, and there's
that's true, right?
There's no
right.
test,
Yeah.
Especially in construction, there are a lot of alcoholics or people who go home and drink a lot. I like to drink a little bit myself, but if you're not giving any signs or giving anything away that you're drinking on the job, there's really no way to catch anybody. So it's like, man, you got the most dangerous drug as far as coordination and lowering your inhibitions, and nobody talks about it at all. But if you have weed in your system, then you're fired.
And the weed could stay in there for weeks after you were high.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the reason is that most users of alcohol, just like most users of marijuana, are not addicts, or not people who do it constantly, or not people whose lives are being ruined about it. Now, that's not true, of course, of cocaine and meth and heroin. There are few social users of those drugs.
That's an interesting idea of, if I smoke weed or do drugs on the weekend, right? Or I drink alcohol on the weekend, and then I work Monday through Friday, and I'm sober. Why do you care that there's a test that reveals sometime in the last 2 weeks I smoked weed? What I mean?
We shouldn't.
Right.
Yeah.
As officers, we can't do that. We can't say, well, I'm going to arrest you for DUI because sometime in the last 2 weeks you drank. It's like we have more immediate tests, and they're pretty straightforward. Eye reflexes,
Oh yeah, I mean blood alcohol tests are reasonable, but those work.
Blow into the breathalyzer or do an eye test. Okay, you're sober. Come to work.
Yeah. And I speak as someone who has pissed hot for opiates from eating poppy seed cake.
Interesting.
Yeah, you really, and I'm not the only person I know that's happened to. Poppy seeds. If you do the inexpensive broad test, poppy seeds will trigger the test for opiates.
Wow, I wonder if that's what John Jones got nailed for.
Yeah.
Cocaine cupcakes.
Do you want to buy my bridge, Sean? That guy's an asshole.
Viagra.
Wait, that's Anderson Silva. Remember he bought some penis pills from Thailand?
Yeah, and John Jones was gas station dick pills.
These are UFC fighters.
And he took those, and I quote from Joe Rogan when he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, "Because I got a big cock, Joe."
Then why did he need the pills?
It's just too much blood. His body can't do it naturally.
Now, needs a transfusion to get.
The drug testing issue is interesting. I just want to put in this last thought. In Utah, I've known a couple people who've gotten DUIs because they got blood tested by the police and they tested positive for marijuana. And my friend who I work with said, "So what if I go to Colorado and get high for a week, and then I come back to Utah and I'm sober and I get pulled over, and for whatever reason the cop wants to blood test me and I get a DUI for that?" And my response is I know it's totally wrong, but the laws of Utah is you can't have it in your system. It doesn't matter when it happened, even though it's not sensible or logical. But yeah, I'm very against the whole drug testing thing.
I feel like generally I would think that any type of testing has to be coupled with some sort of on-view like behavior that's been observed. I don't think it could just randomly. But I guess they could. I guess they could just, hey, you cross the line, the center line for a second, and then they're trying to get an, they smell more on your clothes, and they just turn it into a DUI when it wasn't even that.
I mean, that would be total bullshit if it happened, but this may also be discussing hypotheticals that could happen. It's like discussion of third trimester abortion. It's happens so infrequently as it is that it's creating an issue out of nothing almost.
Right. Well, it was interesting. One day, I came to pick a friend up at the local. Well, I came to pick them up. I got off work at 12:30, and I picked her up at a in the parking lot. She, you park your car there. I'll pick you up. We'll go drive around. And it just happened to be in front of a bar. And I saw a cop leave right as we were leaving. I didn't think anything of it. And about half a mile later, he pulled me over. And I was like, oh. He goes, hi, how you doing? I go, fine. He goes, have you been drinking today? I go, no. And he goes, I need you to step out of the car. And generally, you don't ask someone to step out of the car unless you have something to tell you that there's you usually need something prior observation to cause you to think that they're a DUI before you ask them to step out of the car. So he asked me to step out of the car, and I'm like, I couldn't believe it. And I just said, hey, I just got off work. I showed him my badge, but that was totally BS. So.
Did he apologize once he realized you were on the job and hadn't been drinking and all that?
No, he was just, he should have been embarrassed, but he just said, oh, okay, and he was gone.
Oh.
So, I hate to see cops, when they think they need to get a DUI that bad, but I guess they're out there.
Do you have a question, Dalton, or should I ask one?
I got one.
Okay.
When these videos of cops doing questionable things come out, or even just blatantly wrong things come out, I always, there's always two sides of, cops are corrupt and messed up, and cops are great, blah, blah, blah. And I've thought about this myself, and I've heard this argument of cops need to hold their fellow officers more accountable. What do you think about, I don't know if you've ever experienced it or seen it firsthand, of an officer doing something that's questionable or even wrong, and other officers not really stepping up and saying something, or even telling a superior of, hey, this kind of happened and I don't think it was necessarily right. What do you think about cops holding other cops accountable?
Well, my first comment is I've seen almost no videos that where the actually I saw one. I may have seen one recently, but again, I can't see the whole thing. I've seen almost no videos where the detained person doesn't have some sort of culpability or probable culpability. So I don't think there's a whole bunch of videos out there where people are not, or where the cops are not. I'm sorry, how did I phrase it? Where cops are misbehaving. I just think that winning is ugly. If all you look at is the winning. That being said, but if there was a guy, and my thing is, so if I just said that most of the things are justified or will be shown justified, I don't know that there's going to be a situation where it's actually not justified and it doesn't get addressed, because everybody's complaining about justified policing. So I would just assume that once they stumble on an actual example of unjustified policing, that it'll definitely be handled. I don't know. Maybe there's some examples out there where the cop was definitely messed up and nothing got done. Maybe that's not right. It's kind of infrequent though that I see that.
I certainly am of the opinion that it's hard to know what I'm looking at from a video I see I tend not to watch those videos for that reason. I'm not there. I'm not seeing exactly what the officers are seeing and any other observers are seeing, and it's hard for me to judge. Occasionally you see one where police officers are shooting someone in the back as they run away, but most of the times it's not that. It's
the first thing you have to ask yourself in those situations is, are there any what are all the situations that I can think of where an officer is justified shooting someone in the back, right? So, the first thing you have to do if you see a video of just that is clear that or confirm that that was the case. And unless you do that, then you don't want to move forward. I just see people hesitant to investigate things that are contrary to their initial feelings. And that's contrary to critical thinking,
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of confirmation bias in how all of us.
I know that because I do the same thing, right? I know that. I'm not saying I'm immune to that. Maybe in cops I'm a little easier because I'm more. But if it's politically, I'll be like, does this disprove my feelings? Who knows? I'm not going to investigate it. So.
Are there situations where it's official doctrine to shoot someone in the back as they run away?
Well, I feel like the best definition of shooting somebody in the back or whatever, or shooting somebody in general, is detaining them. So can you detain somebody if they're running away?
Right.
Right? Because they're not threatening you, they're running away. So can you detain them? And you can if they're potentially a significant immediate danger.
Okay.
To the public or to other officers out there who are responding, like the guy pointed a gun at you or used a gun somewhere and turns and runs away. You could shoot him. So nobody else has to encounter him and because if he's running away from you, by definition, you survived that encounter.
Right.
But is the next guy going to be so lucky? Right. So if you do not seize him, and he shoots the next cop. Right, and you had, and he met the standards to be seized at that moment.
Right.
Even though he's running away from you, then you're going to feel really bad, and life could be tough too if you.
That makes sense. If this guy had just killed someone and then he's running away.
Right. or he pointed a gun. I mean, yeah. If a guy has a gun,
Yeah.
could you shoot him just because he's running away? No. If a guy was pointing a gun at people,
Yeah.
and then he sees you
Yeah.
and doesn't stop and turns and run away, now
Yeah.
now you're getting to the you could shoot him.
Here is some trivia. In the early 60s in New York, police could legally fire on anyone fleeing any felony.
Yeah, that was pretty much. I think that was pretty much standard nationwide doctrine. And I hear stories of. I heard this one story of an Albany cop back in like the 80s or the 90s shooting somebody right at the end of that. I mean, the guy stole more than $100 worth of stuff, so it was a felony or something, and he shot him.
That sounds.
The guy was jumping over a fence
Right.
to get away, and the guy shot him. Everyone was like, "What are you doing?" He was like, "Well, he committed a felony." But I mean, that's an urban legend. I don't know for sure,
Right.
but I did hear that a bunch.
Well, it could be real, given that that was indeed the law. That's wrong. That's
wrong.
That's fucked up.
But the funny thing is
Yeah.
that was mixed in with
Yeah.
a lot of really crazy stuff.
Right.
Like there was a ton of violence back in like New York back in those
Oh
days.
yeah,
Just
totally.
off the hook.
Well, this was actually before New York became violent. Started becoming violent in the mid '60s.
Okay.
Yeah, so this was even before that, back in the in the early '60s and before all the violence started escalating in America in the mid '60s. So it wasn't in response to an uptick in violence. It was just
just a standard law, huh?
Yeah, and so, wow, ultimately though, this makes me happy that that's no longer the law.
Yeah, I mean, I think the expectation now is if someone steals, well, it was about 5 years ago, maybe, they upped the level finally from $400 and above as a felony to $950 as a felony. So, but yeah, I mean, someone steals a laptop, should you really shoot them?
Probably not.
No.
Is that,
No.
is that correct?
No.
I feel like most officers don't want to shoot people for things like that.
Yeah. Well, we've made progress. So we all agree. No.
He stole an Apple product. Shoot him. Even cell phones now are like the value's like over $1,000.
Yeah. So how do you? I know you work demonstrations and protests and rallies, and we've talked about that a fair amount, Sean. And I know you're less than happy doing that kind of work. Why?
Oh, really? They can be some of the most exciting times, actually.
Right.
It's just there's a couple different there's two main categories of working a protest: really fun or really not fun.
Right.
If you're standing in the back of a building for 12 hours, that's not fun. If you're on a bicycle, trying to keep in contact with a roaming horde and surviving on your own wits, that's fun. So some of my best times have definitely been during protests. And there's even times when you just have to make snap decisions that kind of work pretty cool and after they've later on. So
I've was thinking of something that the next time I protest something or go to a rally, I'm going to thank the officers there for securing my right as an American to free assembly. Because I was thinking about the last protest I went to after all the Nazis in Charlottesville. I went to to the protest against that, and for the most part, it was very the people I was around were upbeat and just had signs deploring the Nazis. But I know there are also a lot of Antifa around, and finally they found someone they thought probably incorrectly that was a Nazi, and those people fucked it up. Certainly fucked it up for me. I ended up getting some pepper spray in my eye, even though I was a long ways
That's
away.
exciting, though. That's
Yeah.
exciting, right? I mean,
I wanted no part of that. I was there to protest against Nazis in Charlottesville. I was not there to not there to brawl. I was not there to beat up suspected Nazis. I was not there to beat up Antifa. That sucked getting pepper spray in my eye. That was, over 100 feet from me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were some interesting times in Berkeley.
Yes.
Like every month or two for a while, there'd be a Saturday where all the I don't know, the red hats, the right wingers, the alt-right people would show up, and then 10 times as many counter protesters would show up.
And as much as I hate the alt-right, I hate the Antifa. They're both illiberal as far as I'm concerned. They're both resorting to violence, and that's un-American as far as I'm concerned, to do politics by violence.
Well, the alt-right was so outnumbered in general.
Right.
My biased view, or my view as a patrol officer, was that the alt-right was outnumbered, and so we didn't really never really thought of them as being sort of aggressors, but maybe they were.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I support their First Amendment right to demonstrate.
Yeah.
Right. I do not support their right to demonstrate violently. That's un-American. That's illiberal. That's illegal. It's it fucks everything up for the rest of us who want to demonstrate peacefully.
Well, I will have to say that working at UC Berkeley, and being a Democrat and coming from everybody's a Democrat where I was at.
Okay.
I arrived as a Democrat, and currently I'm not a Democrat, but I arrived as one, and I kind of frowned upon some of the actions of the Berkeley College Republicans, but in the last few years, I just come to admire them because they would literally be spit on and assaulted, and they're not even for anything that controversial in my mind.
Right.
They're just trying to they're just re-putting up the Trump poster, we will have this Trump life-size figure up or whatever, and it gets tore down and they overrun, and then they do it again. And I'm just like, wow, that was just really admirable on their part.
Yeah, I mean, I may disagree with their politics, but I certainly think, I certainly welcome their civic participation and their rights to put up posters.
Yeah.
I don't see how anyone, on the left can develop, can justify their position if they can't refute and debate the people on the right, without just denouncing them all as Nazis.
Yeah, we need to be able to, someone asked me the other day, why do I like to argue on Facebook or whatever? And one of my responses was that it's like my way to quote unquote publish my idea, for review amongst my peers, right? Yeah. We got all these people, and there's always a few antagonistic people mixed in, and so they can either contradict your idea or kind of cause you to perfect a little bit, and so I think that's one of the main reasons I like to do that. And I think more people should be open to the idea of not just getting so frustrated, but trying to, it's like verbal jujitsu, the political jujitsu. It's becoming more and more comfortable in different positions and being able to find your way out.
Yeah. I think of the quote often attributed to the great British economist John Maynard Keynes. He said, "When the facts change, I change my mind."
I love that quote.
Yeah. What do you do, sir?
You told me that, and I just love that one.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's more tension with protests and right versus left on campus than there has ever been?
Um, possibly. Possibly. Um, there's always been a significant amount, though. There's always been, as you could imagine, the Palestinian and Jewish. That's always a recurring theme it's gonna pop up at some time. The Jewish considered to be right, and the Palestinians considered to be left.
Even though most Jews in America are Democrats.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just this again. This is the patrol officer's viewpoint.
Right.
And then there's always the what was it? The Prop 29 or the affirmative action that was just in the late 90s. That was kind of.
Oh yes. Yeah, I remember.
So that was kicking in, and so that's when BAM, BAMN, by any means necessary.
Oh yes.
I think that's when they came to existence. This Berkeley group, and was it Yvette Falarka?
Mm-hmm.
She's one of the she's a school teacher who's also, I think, been videotaped committing assault. She's part of that still 20 years later. That particular group.
They're Antifa aligned.
Yeah.
I remember arguing on Facebook with someone I've known a long time who's sympathetic to them, who just gets hysterical when I insult Antifa. And I said, really, by any means necessary? Why aren't you living in the desert and drilling combat and tactics and stuff, and stockpile? Yeah, if you really believe by any means necessary you want to fight Trump.
Right.
I mean,
I really like that line of humor.
Yeah.
When you say stuff like that. I remember there was a bunch of vegans or vegetarians marching.
Yeah.
And it was a few months. It was about like 6-7 months ago.
Yeah.
And they're marching, and so I follow them for a while. But they're like well dressed. They're going to some sort of vegan dinner on campus.
Yeah.
I think they went to Whole Foods to like yell and scream. Ashby and Telegraph, and then they march on campus and they have their dinner. And they're all real well dressed, but there's about 200 of them, so they really kind of stirred things up, I think, at Whole Foods. And so then I was like chanting stuff. I as a bicycle officer, a lot of times you will kind of do a vanguard or you're kind of recon, and you're giving information back to the people in charge of the police department so they can figure out what they're going to do on their little chalkboard or whatever. So I was just chanting things like, I was like, down with omnivores, down with omnivores,
That's hilarious.
And so they said nothing, right? And then I was like, down with people who wear leather, down with people, because obviously you can't get by without having some leather on you. So then they would just looking at me sideways, and I came up with a few more like that.
I will forever amuse me that there was a popular punk band for a while whose name was Vegan Reich.
Vegan Reich.
Yeah.
The alt-right with the alt-left. Yeah. Yeah, we should come up with some. That's like saying we'll come up with a new group called the Alt Middle.
It exists. There are a lot of advocates for radical centrism, new centrism, just in response to how polarized our politics are.
Yeah.
So it's there's some merit to the idea, but you're not the first one to suggest it.
Yeah. What about the brown mediocritus?
What?
I said, what about the brown mediocritus?
Oh, well, just limiting it to, Wait, I'm lost, Sean. I'm lost.
Okay, we can move on.
Okay. So, I certainly, watching videos of the violence in Charlottesville, wondered why the police didn't intervene more, and the answer was they were under orders not to. And you said you've had similar instructions. when you've worked protests here?
Well, yes, the main thing you're told is when you're working a protest group, and this is just straight up protest training, is don't take independent action. So a lot of times, though, something happens, and you're supposed to talk to your sergeant, who's then supposed to call a lieutenant to get permission to take some. So you can see how cumbersome that would be.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So what happens is officers just get desensitized a bit to things that are occurring, and so these things escalate. However, one of the timely things that this sort of prohibits, that we like to do something, or there's a strategy called dealing with the overt act. And the overt act a lot of times is when a protest is beginning to brew, it's beginning to percolate, and then somebody will do something that the officers have the ability to respond to, such as throw a bottle or knock down a barricade. And so, a lot of times the organizers of the protest will be in the back,
Right.
but they may. The thought is they may send somebody, hey, go kick over the barricade and see what the cops do, right? So
Right.
if they kick it over and the cops do nothing, then that seems to be an indication that, okay, let's keep escalating now. And then if one person kicks over the barricade, you conceivably could have stopped that
Right.
and responded and kept things in check. But because you didn't, now you're going to have multiple people now saying it's okay. And then when you have multiple people kicking over barricades or throwing bottles or starting to do whatever they're going to do, now it's out of control because you can't respond to them. So that's sort of balance there. If you have a good leader, he's going to be on scene. He's going to be able to call that and he's going to say, seize the person in the red, in the red jacket, or, put the barricade up at least, or, push the people back. He's going to be able to take a quick action that suggests to people that they can't get away with that. So, but you don't have that a lot of times.
And especially if you have to call everything up the chain of command.
Right. And so, I feel like back in the day, there'd be one side, right? That's the protest. Like there's the protesters and then there's the general public.
Right.
These days, there's two sides, right? There's the protesters and the counter-protesters. Right. So if someone does an overt act against the protesters and no one does anything, the cops are like, oh, hands off. Now it's pretty much open season, right? Now you can pretty much go beat people down and the cops aren't going to do anything. And that's kind of a dynamic that has shown itself over and over again.
Huh, that doesn't seem right.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because you go from, and I've tried to come up with suggestions, but there's, people are tough when they put so much effort into, like, I'm going to talk about lieutenants and captains. They're putting so much effort into coming up with a plan, and then things go completely different, or they think it's hard for them, I feel like, and no offense to them, they're doing the best they can to come out of that.
Right.
And to realize that, hey, yes, it's a crowd control situation, but now it's a deadly force situation. Someone's beating somebody with a bat, right?
Right.
We have to be able to switch out of the crowd control mentality to save a life.
Yeah.
And that's something where, I think that's where we are right now.
How much of a change have you seen on campus and demonstrations since Trump got in office, if any change?
Well, since he got into office, there's been a decrease in problems. But, I feel like a lot of the escalation occurred as it was approaching. I don't know what the corroboration there, but for some reason, as it was approaching him getting elected, that's when the Milo thing happened.
Right.
The big one, and there started being this polarization, where you couldn't wear a red hat around, or you couldn't have a flag around. And along with that, I personally saw a correlation between Obama, you know, kind of championing criminals who'd been what I think legally detained, and violence against basically police and the establishment. So I felt that I see something on TV where if cooler heads would say, okay, let's look at it. Let's keep in mind that this is a situation. Instead, it's the other way. It's like, well, you have people in charge making a statement against the police. The next day, people are interfering with me. It's that quick.
Can I push back against that, Sean?
Yeah,
I remember you said you got that from Obama, and so you told me that a couple of months ago, and
you did some research?
Yeah, I Googled, and I am broadly supportive of Obama's presidency, but I certainly would, react poorly if he were disparaging cops. So I found very little. The one thing I found in his first year was the incident where there was an African American Harvard professor who was. Do you remember that? And and
that was the first one.
Okay, that was really the only one I could find where Obama said the cop had behaved stupidly, and then Obama realized he fucked up. And so, do you remember what happened? The so-called.
Well, I didn't agree with that. I mean, he invited them both. To the Oval, to the lawn or whatever. What he should have said is, "I'll invite the cop to there," but the guy was the guy who obstructed the police officer when he was in the performance of duty. Why inviting him?
Right.
Yeah. So
But still, it was an attempt.
Shouldn't be a tie. It shouldn't be a tie, right? It should be okay. But go ahead.
Okay, but still, I mean, I saw there that Obama had tried to make things right after he did something wrong.
Yeah, no, there was a pattern of him sending like Eric Holder or his chief of staff to like the funerals of the person who was shot or the person who died, or speaking out where, there's attorney general, we're going to do something. Maybe against like Eric Garner or something,
right?
Who was obviously legally detained. Officers were not using weapons. They were trying to physically detain a guy who's like 360 pounds. Right. And I think that's the one. And, I'm pretty sure Sterling, the Brown case, Ferguson, all that. My recollection is that there was always a little something there. And sort of my perspective was he was kind of stoking the fire. I don't believe that was intention. Right.
But that's disappointing.
Yeah. So and so I saw this occurring on the street. I see a change because I think, Dalton, you were asking like how things changed. Anyways, and so that was a definite change leading up to. And so I remember thinking, and then I remember like looking at all the social media that I was privy to. I can't say all of it, but that I was privy to, and not seeing any videos of people coming out and speaking in public for the alt-right until after he became the president-elect.
I think it's pretty clear that a lot of people just didn't like having a black president.
Oh, I don't know. Well,
I'm not saying that was. I'm not saying. Obviously, I'm not claiming that's a motivation.
Right.
For everyone who opposed Obama, but
here's the thing. Yeah. Here's the thing. Obama, my contention, which you weren't able to corroborate, but my contention is that Obama spoke out against the police for black criminals when they were wrong, and where grand juries found that the officers acted correctly.
Right.
And he's a black man, and he's speaking out for black men. Right. And this is perception. I'm just saying perception. And then the other thing is, like, here's another thing. Yeah. Kind of unrelated, but related.
Yeah.
He has a Muslim-sounding name.
Yeah.
Right. And then there was this controversy where he, without the support of Congress or enough people, wanted to bring in all these Syrian refugees. Yeah. Right. That was a perception. You know, well, I feel like you kind of have to be careful, maybe recuse yourself and stand back if it appears like, maybe you're Muslim and now you're trying to bring a bunch of Muslim people in. I don't think that was his reason for doing it, but I still think you have to be a little extra careful.
He's not Muslim.
Right.
Yeah. But, well, we could go down. Why don't we can argue. I mean, I certainly think he was wrong anything he would do to undermine or criticize police is wrong.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you just have to be able to justify yourself.
Right.
Here's my bias was that he'd kind of badmouth somebody in the cops. And then, 5 weeks later, the grand jury comes back with all the evidence, and instead of taking interest to it, he's already badmouthed one or two cops since then. So he's never really slows down, But that was just my general feeling. Okay. I don't mean to dig my heels in too deep there, Nick.
Okay. Oh, well, don't worry, Sean, because I will if you won't. I will just. One thing that's interesting is, well, we're going down too big. We're invited you here to talk about policing and we're arguing politics. We can do that the next time we're hanging out and not recording, Sean.
Yeah, no problem. Is there any other jiu-jitsu things?
I had one more question about policing, and then we can get back to jiu-jitsu. And this is something I touched on with you before. Someone did a study in the last few years about police departments that had continuums of force, right? That had standards for when you apply escalating levels of force up to deadly force. And they reviewed the policies of a number of cities and departments, and then they looked at the effect. And what they found is that departments that had clear guidelines about escalating force, not only were fewer people shot, but fewer cops were killed in the line of duty.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just wondering if you had any, and so this seemed, and looking at the study, looking at their statistics as someone who looks at statistics professionally, it seems like the study was well done, and it seems like it's good evidence for having a use of force continuum. And I just
the industry looks at it two different ways. Yeah. My understanding is one is an escalation and another one is a continuum. The difference being an escalation, you have to do the lower ones before you do a higher one. Right. Whereas a continuum is this is way beyond, grabbing him or trying to, take him down to the ground. I'm just going to go straight to my taser, So is that what you're talking about?
It's just simply having guidelines, in place. Right. For when levels of force are appropriate, right? So none of it is saying you have to wag your finger if someone has.
I agree. Yeah. I agree with you. I guess now I've that's kind of clicked into my mind. Yeah. I feel like that's true, and the reason I feel like that's true is because we have. I feel we have a pretty good defensive tactics. I mean, it's not modernized. It's not like what Dalton would like to see, where we're actually. Well, Dalton or me. I'm not just. I mean, people would like to see us. But everything comes at a cost. Again, you want to pay your guys. But for us, we scrutinize uses of force. You have to write a report. You have to document it. Right. The supervisor has to respond to interview the person who's injured. Right. And I do feel like that. That does. Whereas if there was no review, people would, I'm just going to toss the guy on his head, and you're a little bit more, not that you would do it intentionally, but you're less restrained. Sure.
So I've become a big advocate of this research just because those data seem to offer such strong conclusions about how effective it is in reducing fatalities of both suspects and police.
Well, now the flip side of that, is, anytime you assign something, it's also going to be, there's going to be less uses of force, bad uses of force, because there's less uses of force, right? So if someone's like, should I chase this guy? It's going to be nasty. I don't want to have to be second guessed or all this and that.
Right.
I'm just going to let him go, or so that's also going to be a side effect of it.
Oh, that's, I think, a very valid point. You also have to, measure. You have to account for the, how much crime there is, right? Does having use of force policies increase crime? And the study, accounted for that, measured, crime, and found that that doesn't occur.
Interesting. I don't know how they would do that. I mean,
just by measuring local levels of crime.
But you'd have to include crime that wasn't reported.
Right.
Sort of, I mean,
right.
It's like, if no one goes out and writes tickets, does that mean that traffic is running better because there's less traffic citations? No, you'd have to go out and say, okay, well, let me actually look at who's running stop signs.
Right.
So.
All right. Anything? Okay. Dalton, you had some questions about jiu-jitsu.
Where did you start training? Because Nick, you said he's been training for 20 years.
Close to it, right?
Yeah. So, what was the jiu-jitsu scene like when you first started? How did you hear about it? And where did you first go?
Okay. Yeah. Sure. I'd already done a little bit of wrestling after high school, and then I'd done about 2 years of judo prior to doing any jiu-jitsu. So I started doing jiu-jitsu or grappling in 2000 with some other police officers. So that was kind of unlikely. But it was in Berkeley. There was a police officer there named Alan Pagel and his wife Lily.
Oh,
and
yes.
Yeah, it was with them. They're now under the Straight Blast Gym. They're Straight Blast Gym affiliates. Yeah.
Lily, I think, was one of the first black belts in jiu-jitsu in the East Bay years ago.
Really?
Right? Isn't that right, John?
Sounds about right. Yeah. She's really technical, really good. I mean, she really understood jiu-jitsu from just her judo, because her and Alan were both judo black belts.
My only experience with her, she cornered two guys against me in a tournament. I beat one of them on points and lost to the other one on points.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I trained with them for 2 years. It was basically like once a week. And and then he started in 2002. He started his gym, and so I stayed with him for, I think it was 2000, maybe it was 2000, late 2001. He started his gym and started an affiliation with Straight Blast. And then in 2002, I moved from the Berkeley area. I moved to Concord. So, and my hours changed and schedule changed. So suddenly it was more beneficial to train in Concord. And of course, Cesar Gracie was there. And for me, that was the heyday of jiu-jitsu in my mind. That was 2002. And Cesar Gracie, he has a different style now, but back then he was just wide open, and it was just such a great environment. We had a really good time back then, I think.
How was it rolling with Jake Shields and the Diaz brothers, Nick and Nate?
I did get to do that, and Nick and Nate. I knew Nick. When I got there, Nate was a blue belt. Nick was a blue belt, and Nate was just, I don't even know if he was training. But they're more subtle, right? So they'll flow in and flow out of submissions on you. Like initially, you'll be like, oh, he could have submitted me, and after a bunch of times, you're like, oh, he just chose not to. He flowed in and flowed immediately out. Yeah. Jake Shields is scary.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah, he's so hard because his intensity level is so far above any like the average mortal that you're afraid he's going to go through a limb and through the joint. So you kind of just like, okay, you can pass, okay. And he has such a mean guillotine that, like, he threatens you with things that just stop you from even trying. Like, you can't even sit up, or you can't even turn on your side because you're suddenly in his guillotine. You know what I mean? So you're already operating at like a -2 or with a handicap because he's just so good.
Remember Ken Stewart, Dalton?
Oh yeah, of course. Love Ken.
Yeah. Ken said of rolling with shields, when he just grabs you, it hurt.
Oh, I didn't know Ken had rolled with Jake. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And Ken's no punk. He's a big,
No.
strong dude.
No. Oh yeah, I mean, everyone. I know some really good grapplers like Sean and John Elliott who have just been crushed by. Well, I don't know if that was John Elliott said Shields just crushed him and made him look dumb.
Yeah, he is just he's like a hot knife through butter. But what I liked about him is he's a no-gi guy, so he's underhooks and overhooks, and I mean I like rolling in the gi a lot, but I mean when it comes to technique, I'm definitely a no-gi guy, and so he would always show very relevant techniques, so that was nice.
Huh. The gi is wrong, Sean.
Yes, I second that.
Well, there's two types of gi rolling.
Yeah.
There's cloth dependent, and then there's non-cloth dependent. So I definitely don't grab cloth. So I'm not a cloth grabber, but I do enjoy the gi because I feel if you roll in the gi, like what you should do, Dalton, is you on the sly you go to a gi place and you roll in the gi, and you still just do all your overhooks and underhooks, and you're going to get choked out by these cowards that like to choke you out, but at least you can say, hey, he just choked me out with the collar, right? He didn't use real jiu-jitsu.
I've actually had that happen. I actually own a gi. A friend of mine gave me one. I gave him a compliment on it. I said, I was at his open mat that he runs. I said, and he's wearing it, and I said, as much as I like to hate on the gi, I am a little jealous of how good they look sometimes.
Well,
sometimes they just look really sharp.
Yeah.
And then like 20 minutes later, he went in the other room, took it off, and then just gave it to me.
That's
and
cool.
I tried to refuse, but he wouldn't let me. So I've trained in it 3 times.
Yeah.
And I think the first time I just put on the gi top, and I was in like top half guard, trying to pass, and all of a sudden my partner got a collar choke on me.
Yeah.
And I had to tap. I was pretty surprised by it. I mean, I knew that stuff was there, but just not knowing any idea of what to do, it was pretty surprising. But I'm a huge fan of wrestling. The gym I train at, and Nick trains at in Salt Lake, we always start standing. We train wrestling techniques every class, and I just love wrestling. I really I competed in a tournament not too long ago, and I took the guy down and submitted him, and I was most proud of the takedown because I didn't wrestle in high school,
right.
So it's taken a lot of hard work to just be somewhat competent at wrestling.
And this is a sub only tournament too, which is all about pulling guard and sitting and leg locks and all that.
Yeah, I hate that style. I like, the gym I started at, or it's the same gym I'm at now, but, starting at a gym where wrestling is heavily taught and used, I'm very grateful for that. But
I'm jealous of you because, everything starts on the feet. So if you can end up on top, you just better.
Come train at Bay Jiu-Jitsu in Berkeley. There's a lot of wrestling there, Sean.
I need to roll in there and do that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Certainly I've always been those 2 gyms where I spent most of my time training have focused heavily on wrestling. I find it really hard.
Really?
I don't feel like I'm better at it than I used to be, but I still feel like it's...
You still battle, and then the young guys come in and...
Yeah. Like I was rolling with a guy just this week, and he's really, he's a big guy, your size, Sean, and he's really fit, but he's new. And, once on the ground, I could control him, I could submit him easily. But I tried to hit a double on him, and I hit him, and then I heard some crunching in my neck, and it was just like I hit a wall. And then I just... And I think my neck was in reasonable position, but I still heard, it sucked.
Yeah, wrestling is very tough. Even at our gym, there's guys that aren't that great at it because, they go through the motions of drilling and doing it.
Yeah.
but they don't really want to learn it. And there's a few guys, there's like 3 guys in particular, me and 2 other guys at our gym that I watch college matches, tons of Instagram pages on wrestling. I watch tape, I watch instructionals. So even if you're at a gym that wrestles a lot, if you don't want to really excel at it, then you're not going to, because it just takes so much time to get good at it.
Yeah. Well, when Jake Shields had a gym in Berkeley and I was a member, we always started standing. So that was my second foray into takedowns. The first being the judo. So I felt like I had a little bit of advantage. I had an advantage there. So I have a little system, and Nick, I think you just have to develop a little system that works for you, and then at least you know when you're going down, right? I'm getting taken down, so I'm sure you do that. But the one thing I didn't like was just like, the mats get wet. I mean, you're just sliding on ice.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of wrestling shoes.
Okay. I've been wearing them too, just because I realize that a lot of times I get myself in trouble rolling is because I've slipped somehow, and someone's gotten in favorable position on me because I slipped.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you do get leg locked more though wearing wrestling shoes.
Interesting. Yeah, but on the street you're going to have shoes on, so it makes sense that it's going to be very applicable.
Yeah, I've started wearing wrestling shoes. I mean, when we do our leg lock drills, I take them off.
Right.
And when we do our rolling, I take them off. But anytime we're drilling or at my gym, we do live wrestling rounds every class. So it's just strictly takedowns. I like to wear the shoes because the grip, and I don't want to slip and tweak my knee or whatever. And I've also, toe injuries, like foot type injuries really suck. Right. So I'm a big fan of the wrestling shoes.
But do you wear them when you compete?
No, not at all.
You can in Naga if you want.
Yeah, well, there was actually a guy at the tournament just a couple weeks ago that was wearing them. But, I like leg locks and stuff, and I don't want to give my opponent any advantage on grabbing a hold of my leg.
Well, I'm jealous of you guys in your leg lock game.
It's not too late, Sean.
I think about it a lot. I think about, geez, someday,
Yeah. But, that's the only way I have any luck with rolling with Sean is if I go for a leg. Otherwise, he just crushes me.
It's totally. Well, you're very strong especially for your size. I'm always surprised, Nick. But I'm always like, okay, pass my guard. That's another good thing is I've never had great knees, so it's like I let people pass my guard anyways, and I put them in half guard. So that's kind of helped me against leg lockers a little bit.
Yeah, I've honestly started to get away from heel hooks because I feel like guys escape them so much easier. So I'm primarily an ankle lock guy, at least right now. I love the tripod ankle lock, and I feel like I've really developed my ankle lock squeeze.
That's good.
Just like a choke, you develop a squeeze over time.
Yeah.
So I think ankle locks are going to be the future of leg locks.
So
I think
they're much harder to get out of.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's much harder, but there's pros and cons. I think guys are willing to gut out ankle lock more and fight it off more.
If they're gutting it out, it's because the person putting on the ankle lock doesn't know how to do it right.
That is true. But in a tournament scenario, guys are more willing to injure their ankle than their knees.
A lot of outside heel hooks, especially, on your side, attack the ankle more than the knee.
Oh, yeah. I've popped a couple guys' ankles from heel hooks.
Damn.
Yeah. I have too.
Very.
Actually, once I broke a guy's ankle with a tripod in a tournament.
Hell yeah.
And then I got disqualified.
Why?
It's jiu-jitsu by the bay. It's bullshit. There was no reason for me to get DQ'd. I thought I'd won. There was a big pop. The guy tapped, and then I found out I'd been DQ'd, and we had it on tape, and we took it to the guy running the tournament, and he's told some sort of bullshit about how I went sideways. It was bullshit. And then a year later, I was there to support a teammate who was competing, and I saw some kid win by tripod and also get DQ'd. So it's just a bullshit tournament. Bad rules. It should be wipeout legal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's some bullshit.
What is there? Can white belts do any type of foot
Yeah,
locking,
straight
or
ankle locks.
they can do the straight
Yeah.
ankle
Yeah,
locks?
they
Okay.
can do straight ankle locks. They can do tripods. They can do the cross body straight ankle lock.
Mhm.
Yeah, it depends on the tournament
Yeah,
too.
that's the IBJJF rule.
Yeah, because I think for a long time Naga allowed every submission in every division. I
Yeah,
think when I first started, that's when
yeah,
they changed it,
yeah.
where they kind of restricted it a little bit.
But the only rule is you have to be an intermediate or advanced to heel hook. Everyone else can still reap. I think they can still do every submission.
Yeah, but I've actually gone away from leg locks lately because I depended on them too heavily
Yep.
when I first started because not the gyms around Salt Lake didn't focus on leg locks. So, and I'm such a competitive person. I want to get as many taps as possible. So, I'd roll with a lot of guys at open mats and it's like, okay, well, I can't pass their guard and get their back or whatever,
Yeah.
but I can grab a hold of their legs and tap them out.
Yeah.
But then, 6 months ago or maybe a little bit more, I rolled with a couple guys who were good enough to avoid my leg locks, and then they would pass my guard, and then I was just kind of screwed.
Right.
So for the past 6 months, I guard passing and going after chokes and arm locks has been my number one priority. And we have a newer student, Luke, who's very good, who's about a year in, and I told him when he was about 6 months in, because he was all about leg locks, and he was super pumped up about it. I said, hey, listen, those are great, and don't stop training those, but your number one priority right now should be passing the guard.
Well, that's my game.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So when you do guard passing, you guys are doing no gi.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much a no gi type stuff. So you don't get to the guy's upper body and then fall back into like an arm bar or anything. What kind of attacks are you doing?
I almost never do arm bars.
Yeah.
My favorite attack is, and I can do it from half guard, side control, or mount. But I like to go for an Americana, make the guy turn into it, and then I'll lock up a Kimura grip to either Kimura him or take the back.
Okay.
And I really like north-south. North-south I can get Kimura grips, or if they turn over guillotines or turtle position, take the back. That's primarily my game, but starting to work on Darce chokes. 6 months ago, my instructor Jack, he told me, he's like, you need to get better at chokes, like straight up. He's like, your leg locks are great, your leg locks are like a 7 out of 10 or whatever, but everything else is a little bit lower. So let's try and focus on chokes and passing the guard. So that's been my focus lately.
Wow, okay.
For me, it has been when I pass, not to even go for any submissions, just to hold top position and to make it unpleasant for the person under me. And if they give up something obvious, great. But if not, I'll just stay there on top and hold and crush.
Yeah, obviously, training partners become very adept at not letting you get it. They just know how to, block you, definitely.
Yeah. What have you been working on recently in grappling, Sean?
I should bust out my notebook. But I actually do a lot of what Dalton was saying. I do a lot. I have some sneaky Americana setups. I do of course, I'm looking at the same stuff, like Kimuras. I kind of have a north-south choke that I can threaten with a little bit. Still perfecting that. Sometimes I get to the side, and if they put their chin up, I go for the north-south choke, and if they put their chin down to block that, then I'll try to pull in, try to do a guillotine.
That's been my experience rolling with you, where you give up bottom half guard, you sweep, and then from top of side control, you look for the Americana, or for a while, it seemed like you were working a lot of neck cranks. You moved off from those?
Well, I do. I kind of call it head control.
Right.
But sometimes people tap from it, and then I did have actual cranks. Yeah. But I'm in a IBJJF sensitive gym.
Yeah.
So
That's terrible. I'm sorry.
So a couple times, because I have these weird neck cranks, so a couple times people
Yeah.
go, hey, that's a neck crank, and after
Yeah.
a couple times I'm like, okay. So what I'll do is, a lot of times you can secure the neck, so like getting ready to crank it,
Yeah.
like where you start to tense and lock it in.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's enough against some lower belts, white belt, blue belts, purple
Right.
belt. They'll a lot of times, sometimes they'll tap just to that.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm kind of cranking, but I'm not like twisting the neck, obviously.
Yeah.
So even if it's a crank, I don't mind doing that. Yeah. But I basically believe, in head control. Definitely.
Yeah, I remember spending a little time at an IBJJF friendly gym and sort of getting into little arguments where, well, does that Darce or Peruvian feel more like a crank or more like a choke?
Oh, they love to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you tap to somebody, you see somebody tap, and
Yeah.
then they ask, oh, or they tap to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that was more of a crank. But I don't get that here that much anymore.
That's good.
Occasionally, somebody will angrily say, "Yeah, that felt more like a crank."
Yeah.
Still a tap though.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's just fun,
Yeah.
Mainly it's fun.
Yeah, that's the biggest reason people do it. My instructor, Jack, has talked about that, how I forget who it was. There's a video or a story of somebody doing a seminar in like Iceland or Greenland, something like that, and he asked the group of people he was teaching, why do you guys do this sport? Like, what's the reason? And a couple people raise their hand, self-defense or blah, blah, blah. And he's like, okay, outside of a bar type situation, how often are you guys getting in fights, or how prevalent is fighting outside of that scenario? And basically, especially in a country like that, it's like, well, almost zero. And grappling becomes almost like a meditative thing for people, or an activity where your sole focus is on that activity, and you kind of can escape the busyness or hecticness of everyday life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if it's like a real life video game or what, but it definitely sucks you in. And it's so therapeutic, because you can lose and still feel kind of happy about it, or humbled in a good way.
Yeah, speak for yourself.
I
feel that way if it's my instructors kicking my ass. If it's anybody else, then I get bummed out.
Yeah. Sometimes there's guys who beat you, and you're like, yeah, you've been doing this longer, you're this or that, and then there's guys who are just animals.
Yeah.
It's like, you're 30 pounds lighter than me, but you're just tossing me around or outworking me. But it kind of lights the fire, so I still appreciate it. It's that mano a mano, that that son of a bitch beat me, god damn it, and then you kind of brood on it. But you kind of brood on it after a while. You start thinking a little more technical, like, well, how did he beat you?
Yeah.
So then I kind of like it.
All right. Anything else you want to add, Sean?
Let's see. Not really. I feel like it was a pretty good coverage about what I do at the police department, and some good questions.
Good.
It's fun talking about jiu-jitsu. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you, Sean, for coming in.
Yes, thank you very much.
You guys are both welcome. Thanks.
Well, that wraps up another episode of Professor and the Idiot. If you like what you heard, please give us a good rating at Apple Podcasts or wherever else you heard this. If you didn't, fuck off to the place you came from.
Damn straight.